in a lot of these cases your environment, and or it's even just the lack of knowing that causes this anxiety. So I wanted to start with food as a category of something we can talk about. So in your experience, would you say there are certain sectors or countries in the world that are very easy to be plant-based at?
Oh, this is one of my favorite questions. I've answered this question so many times over my time in culinary travel. Yes, there are. Most countries you can find good vegan food, but certainly some countries are a lot easier than others. The countries that you tend to go for first are India, Sri Lanka. These are destinations where vegan food culture, vegetarian food culture, to be perfectly honest, but vegan food culture more specifically, are quite common across the country. So, I'm just thinking about one of my all-time favorite Indian snacks, pani puri, which is this incredibly delicious, crunchy vegetarian-based shell, and it's full of potatoes and minty, pomegranate water, fully vegan. It's
So
it's
cool.
not something that you necessarily have to think about. And there's estimates that up to 5 to 10% of the Indian population overall may well be vegan, and certainly being vegetarian is very, very common there. So India is certainly the first one. Sri Lanka is another one where you can get some absolutely spectacular vegetarian cuisine. Um, I think there's lots of other destinations I can point to that might feel a little bit counterintuitive. Thailand, Italy, um, South Korea, Mexico. And there's some really great resources, I think, to help vegan travelers if they're particularly interested in finding certain restaurants. I'm thinking of a website called The Happy Cow, which I know that your listeners will be familiar with. That's a great resource, I think, if you're looking for specific places to eat. But no matter where you're going, I think the key thing is do your research. If you're a foodie, use your recipe books, read your recipe books first, or just do a Google on the cuisine. So you go actually knowing, firstly, what dishes are common. And the reason that's important is you've got to get a basic understanding of what ingredients may be in those dishes. The key challenge, I think, when you're traveling and eating as a vegan is really getting an insight into what base ingredients are going into foods. And the most important information you need to be armed with are what types of seasonings and stocks are likely to be used in food. So you're really alive to what those things that might be within dishes that aren't necessarily visible. I'm thinking of things like fish sauce or chicken stock or fish stock, things that are really quite common across global cuisine, but particularly if you're looking at, say, some Southeast Asian cuisines. You know, fish sauce is obviously a salt and can be quite commonly used. Just knowing that, going armed with that knowledge and being able to ask that question, does this have X in it, is really helpful. It also helps you understand how to ask for a modified version of a dish. So I'm thinking of South Korea as an example. Now, South Korea can be tricky when you're eating vegan, but it's a cuisine that's very component based. So dishes tend to be made up of lots of smaller things. So if you know what to take off a dish, because you know what the base ingredients are, that can be really helpful. So some of your listeners might be familiar with a dish called bibimbap, which is a rice dish. Beautiful, beautiful looking dish. And it's topped with lots of different ingredients. Most of them, in fact, predominantly, they are vegan toppings. Often it's served with beef or with an egg. If you know that, you know you can just ask to have it without beef, without the egg, and you're faced with this most delicious vegan dish. So I think that research and just knowing some of those core dishes, seasoning, sauces really can help a lot, just arming yourself with the facts when you're eating. The other thing I know that's more difficult to achieve is watching the preparation of your food. So if you're, for instance, using eating street food, being able to see what ingredients are being used to prepare that dish can be incredibly helpful, because then you can make an informed decision about what you are eating. But my top tip, my absolute number one top tip for any vegan traveler, is when you arrive in a new place, take a food tour. Take a food tour, because that is going to give you access to a food expert. Most likely, you're going to go through a local food market, ask a lot of questions. And so you'll get really a good sense of what the base ingredients are from a local, and you can ask some questions about what those things that you might need in terms of language, or things to look out for in the dishes that you're eating, and just getting that local insight. I mean, I know from our standpoint, the reason that people love our trips, and particularly when vegan travelers take our trips, is they benefit from the expertise of their local leader. So you've always got someone to ask, what's in this? Or you can use their expertise, obviously, in the local language to just interrogate what is in a dish, because it is hard. It is really hard, but I think those are a few things that you can do to make it a lot easier.
100%. I think one of the things that you really touched on that is super important is doing your research, but that could come in so many different facets. That could be learning the basics of the language, whether it's just a few words like don't put X, and just learning that, which is something a local guide can be good for, which is something the app Google Translate could be good for. There's so many different ways that you can arm yourself with the research. But
It really is. And